Good afternoon. Please join me in welcoming our webcast viewers. My name is Gillian Riley. I'm the president of the Canadian Club of Toronto and your host. Viewers, thank you for joining us. Merci de nous rejoindre sur Internet aujourd'hui. We are proud of the club's track record of providing a forum for leaders from business, politics, and the community to share their viewpoints with us. Canada's ambassador to the U.S. will do that in a moment. Before I formally introduce him, let me tell you about some of our upcoming events. In 2 days, on Thursday, September 28th, Nobel laureate and Queen's University Professor Emeritus, Dr. Arthur MacDonald, will address us on the topic of fundamental science and innovation. And on Tuesday, October 3rd, we welcome Anthony Lacavera, founder and chairman, Global Live, for the launch of his new book, How Can We Win? To order your tickets or to learn more about the club, please visit our website at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNCLUBTO or by using that hashtag. I would like to express special thanks to today's sponsor, Toronto Dominion Bank, represented here by Frank McKenna. Thank you so much for your generous support. And now our guest speaker. Our relationship with our southern neighbor has certainly been in the spotlight like never before. Whether it is NAFTA negotiations, softwood lumber discussions, or shifting American immigration policy, Canada-US relations are at a critical point. Luckily for Canada, Ambassador David MacNaughton has represented our interests in Washington since March 2016. An experienced political strategist and public affairs industry veteran, his unique blend of skills and experience is certainly serving us well. Ambassador MacNaughton is keenly aware of the importance of maintaining and strengthening the bilateral partnership with our closest trading partner and ally. L'ambassadeur MacNaughton est très conscient de l'importance de maintenir et de renforcer le partenariat bilatéral avec les États-Unis. Shifts in political leadership are having transformative impacts on a number of key areas. Fortunately for us, the Canadian ambassador in Washington is a master at business transformation. Whether as a public affairs entrepreneur, head of North America's largest public relations firm, or president of a financial services company, Ambassador MacNaughton has been a trusted advisor for decades. In the public sector, he served as advisor to the minister at the Departments of Transport, Industry, and Foreign Affairs. He was principal secretary to the Premier of Ontario from 2003 to 2005. Prior to his ambassadorship, he served as chairman of Strategy Corp for 11 years. Again, if you have questions, please fill out one of the Q&A cards at your tables, and one of the staff members will collect them. Encore une fois, si vous avez une question, remplacez une des cartes de Q&A sur vos tables et un de nos employés les collectera. Ambassador MacNaughton, the Canadian Club of Toronto's podium is yours.
Thanks, Jillian. I was going to jump up there, but I thought it would look pretty bad if all of a sudden I fell flat in my face. So, good afternoon to all of you. I very much appreciate your being here today, and I'm grateful for the invitation to speak to you about this topic that is so important and near and dear to my heart. If I may, I'd like to also give a special recognition to one of my predecessors in this job, Mr. Frank McKenna, whose tenure as ambassador to Washington was a model of how this job should be done as far as I'm concerned. It's great to see you, Frank. I should tell you that Frank just gave me a piece of advice before I came up here. He said, "Don't say anything." So I heard some of that from the Prime Minister's office this morning, too. So. But in the past few days, I've been thinking about this talk and about what I can say that will add to or maybe cut through some of the other noise you've been hearing about NAFTA, our relationship with the U.S., and the talks underway right now. There's a lot to digest, let's face it. And I think probably the best contribution I can make is to try and provide some basic information about what's actually going on, and then put it in some context. My message to you is actually quite reassuring. To start, I can share that round 3 of our scheduled talks with the US and Mexico to modernize NAFTA is unfolding pretty much as we expected it would. That is to say that we're making progress, but it's hard work, and there's a lot more hard work ahead. Now, that's the kind of statement that tends to make journalists really grumpy. But that is just the reality of how these talks tend to unfold. It's never easy, and if it were easy, there'd be no need to negotiate. The pattern is basically this. The negotiators from each country sit down at a table and exchange chapters. They compare the language and they figure out where they agree. That's step number 1. This took up a lot of work in Washington and Mexico and in Ottawa this past weekend, where that process continued. By now, they've parked many of the areas, clearing the underbrush, so to speak, where all of the parties agreed at the outset, and they've identified places where there are gaps. And increasingly, they're getting down to, as we used to say, talking turkey. And some of those conversations, I think it's fair to say, have been more than a little heated. Others have been perfunctory and highly technical. Overall, I'd have to say that the tone remains constructive. Without question, there's a degree of uncertainty about the outcome. I have no crystal ball, and neither does anyone else. What I can say is that I remain optimistic that the ultimate result will be good for Canadians, and indeed for Americans and Mexicans. I say that because I know how incredibly interconnected we are in the North American partnership, and particularly in our relationship with the United States. We benefit a great deal from the relationship, but so do they. This extends to our trade, of course, which is almost perfectly reciprocal and balanced. But it's also bigger than that. It's even bigger than NAFTA at many levels. For starters, I cannot get over, in the hundreds of conversations I've had with American friends and colleagues, how often the personal connections come up. They come to Canada every year to hunt or fish. They have a staffer who's Canadian or is married to one. They have a child studying at a Canadian university. I hear this all the time. And extends to all walks of life. When you have 400,000 people crossing the border every day and $2 billion worth of goods and services traded every single day, that's a lot of relationships. Those relationships are the cement in the foundation of this partnership. That foundationship was there long before NAFTA came along in the early 1990s. These relationships and the strength of them is most often in public view in times of difficulty for one or other of us. Every year to this day, Nova Scotia sends a Christmas tree to Boston. The reason is that in 1917, 100 years ago, it was Bostonians who led the first response to the Halifax explosion. That was an almost unimaginable catastrophe. 2,000 dead, more than 9,000 injured. Bostonians were there for Canada. And that's why when something like Florida and Texas hurricane occurred, Canadians were there for them. In Georgia a couple of weeks ago, after Hurricane Irma, Georgia Power linemen were working to restore electricity. Working right alongside them were 125 workers from Hydro-Quebec who traveled 1,200 miles to do so. At the same time, 170 Hydro One workers were in Florida helping to restore power there. This just happens in the Canada-US relationship. It happens so automatically, we take it for granted. We shouldn't take it for granted, and neither should they. Now, that level of trust doesn't mean we always agree. Quite clearly, we don't always agree. But what it does mean, as Prime Minister Trudeau has said, is that we can work through our disagreements with goodwill. That goodwill is real. So that's a great source of optimism for me. It's also true, however, that because we are just 35 million people, roughly a tenth the size of the American population, and because they are a superpower, we have a harder time getting heard there than they have here. Pierre Trudeau characterized the relationship with the United States as a mouse and an elephant. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said he prefers to think of Canada as a moose, not a mouse. I quite like that. It suggests to me that we're maturing somewhat. In any case, we know we have to work harder to be heard, and that's why you've seen such extensive outreach from the federal government and indeed all levels of government in Canada during this past year. Virtually every member of cabinet, led by the Prime Minister, has had multiple meetings in the States with counterparts in the Trump administration, with members of Congress, with governors, with municipal leaders. Those contacts now run into the hundreds. Here's what we tell them, and you've likely heard it before because we keep saying it over and over. 9 million US jobs depend on trade and investment with Canada. A majority of states have Canada as their largest export market. Canada supplies more than 40% of America's imported crude. We supply the states with more uranium and electricity than any other country. And Canada buys more goods from the United States than China, Japan, and the UK combined. That always gets a double take from my American friends. They can't believe it. But it goes beyond those big numbers to multiple instances all across the states where the relationship with Canada is absolutely vital to America's prosperity. It makes a difference when I tell a member of Congress that the factory that employs 400 people in his or her district sends 30% of its sales to Canada. Or when the state of New York flirts with restrictive Buy America legislation, and I can tell the governor that 4 companies employing over 800 people are working on infrastructure projects funded by Canadian federal or provincial governments. That gets their attention. A couple of weeks ago, it was suggested to me by one member of Congress that NAFTA had wrecked U.S. poultry exports. I responded to him, the facts. The facts are that since 1994, U.S. poultry exports to Canada are up 209%. And they have a $246 million surplus with us in poultry and eggs. I might have said food for thought. Or, given the fact that he said we had wrecked the poultry market, I might have said some chicken, some wreck. Sorry about that. And it goes on. In Virginia, 210 Canadian companies employ 13,000 workers. In Arizona, Canadians own 25,000 homes, and Canadian-owned businesses employ 18,000 Arizonans. In Florida, a huge proportion of that great Sunshine State, orange juice is sold in Canada. I should tell you that I've spent a fair amount of time with Senator John McCain, and certainly I'm sure everyone hopes that his treatment goes well. But he said to me a couple of weeks ago that he loves Canadians, that he will do anything he can to support NAFTA and Canada's trade with the United States. But he said, there's one thing I really, really do hate about Canadians. And I said, Senator, what's that? And he said, whenever the Calgary Flames or the Edmonton Oilers playing the Phoenix Coyotes, the stands are filled in Phoenix with Canadians, and it just makes me really mad. In any case, you can also take a company like Can-Am Steel, whose parent company is based in Quebec. Can-Am has plants in Maryland and New Hampshire with about 4,000 employees, and roughly half of those are in the US and half in Canada. How do you even begin to untangle that, and why would you want to? But we don't just sell to each other. We make things together that we sell to the rest of the world. There's a company called IPEX, which has plants in Canada and the United States, which supplies material from Canada to the United States. It's pipe. And together, we make that pipe and then sell it to 26 different countries. Canadian and U.S. prosperity is inextricably linked. What this means, it means we can be very direct with our American friends in telling them neither of us needs slower, more cumbersome trade at the border. We need the reverse. Neither one of us needs costly, cumbersome, and difficult regulations on either side of the border where neither safety nor health is compromised. We need less regulation. We can be blunt in saying more restrictive Buy America measures, to the extent that they give greater preferential treatment to local companies in the U.S. over Canadians, would ultimately hurt American workers, not help them. Because, of course, such measures always necessarily meet with an equivalent response. And that gets into a tit-for-tat exchange where nobody wins. And I've said to the Americans over and over again that one of the subjects I did really badly in school at was physics. And I don't remember much of my physics, but I do remember one thing, which is the third law of physics, which is to every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. And the measures like Buy America will trigger that, and that would be bad for both countries. We can be frank in reminding our largest trading partner that our steel industries are integrated, that our automobile supply chains are completely intertwined, and that car parts and components cross the border multiple times before they make into a finished car. And we can be absolutely honest with our American friends in saying that Canada's goal is a good deal, not any deal. Vice President Pence himself said that this can turn out to be a win-win-win. We agree. Make no mistake, win-win-win isn't just aspirational, it's a necessity in a deal of this kind. Prime Minister Trudeau and Minister Freeland have made Canada's priority very clear. Those priorities are firm. It's a first principle for us that any effort to roll back trade between our two countries would be bad for both economies. We want more trade, not less. Though we will not negotiate in public, I can assure you that our negotiators are strongly defending Canada's interests, and they will continue to do so. And I can tell you something else. Our job in making sure that Americans understand the value of the trading relationship doesn't end with a renegotiated NAFTA. The transformation of our economies and the associated disruption as a result of technological advancements will continue for years. Every member of Congress hears regularly from individuals or businesses who are having trouble adjusting to the change that is taking place in our economy. And it's always easier to blame them, whoever them happens to be. They seldom hear the good news stories, the stories about how the three NAFTA countries have 7% of the world's population and 27% of global trade. But those big statistics don't make much of an impact on individual members of Congress. That's why we've reached out to businesses big and small across our country to share their stories with us and with their American suppliers, customers, and partners. These stories are many and varied. They involve universities sharing research projects. They involve health professionals working together to find solutions to diseases both in North America and around the world. And they involve military and security cooperation unseen between two countries anywhere in the world. American military personnel constantly tell me stories of fighting with brave Canadians in trouble spots around the world, and we should be very proud of that. This military cooperation is not a new phenomenon. In fact, more than 100 years ago, 35,000 Americans crossed the border into Canada before the U.S. joined the First World War to go abroad with Canadian soldiers. One of those soldiers was a young American aviator from California. His name was Gordon Philip MacNaughton, my grandfather. Yes, we all have personal stories about the relationship with America, as many of them do with us. As we continue to diversify our trade with Europe, with CETA, which recently came into effect last week, and as we engage with Asian countries in discussing TPP 11 and reach out to explore trade opportunities with China, we will continue to work long and hard to make North America more open and more competitive so that we can continue to deliver the many benefits to Canadians from coast to coast that rely on that trading relationship. I believe that we will continue to do so, and I seek your help in making the case to Americans and to Mexicans over the next months and years that will lead to a fair and balanced trade relationship in NAFTA and a continuing strong economic relationship, military relationship, security relationship, and personal relationship with our best friends and neighbors, the United States of America. So thank you all very much for coming, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Well, thank you. We do have some questions from the floor, so I'm just going to read them out. The first one, Ambassador MacNaughton, one of Canada's top 6 priorities in the current NAFTA discussions is the modernization of the rules of temporary entry for business people traveling between Canada and the U.S. and the Trade NAFTA Professionals List. We have been told that the U.S. negotiators are extremely cautious about discussing this issue because of the link to immigration perceived by the U.S. Congress. My question is, do you have any advice to the business community about how we can change the narrative in the U.S. and detach the issue of trade and services and the movement of professionals that create jobs in both countries from the whole immigration debate that continues to rage in the U.S.? Thank you. The person wrote their name, but I don't know where they are. I hope they're okay if I'll wait till you answer.
Well, obviously that whole issue is one which is of extreme importance to us. It is, obviously things have changed a lot since 1994. I like to joke that in 1994, if you'd asked people what Amazon was, they would have said it was a river in South America, but you wouldn't hear that today. And so updating the list and actually facilitating the movement of professionals and being able to have the kind of movement of labor across our borders is an absolutely critical part of what we've asked for in the negotiations. And while it is true that the Americans didn't exactly embrace it, they're considering what we've put on the table. And I think that the really important thing for Canadian business to do is to try to engage your American counterparts, your American friends, whether it be the American Chamber of Commerce or other businesses or just business relationships you have, and to get them to press the United States to realize that this is good for both of us. This isn't a Canadian ask that is really going to be hugely important to us but not important to them. It really is something that is going to benefit both countries. So I hope we can make progress on that. I think we have to, because so much of our economy is now dependent on services, not just on goods.
Yeah, very good question. And this question was posed by Stephen Crine, CEO, Canadian Employee Relocation Council.
I'm shocked.
A very appropriate question. Okay, the next question. In Canada's foreign policy dealings with countries such as China, a moral and human rights dimension often emerges ahead of trade missions. Given recent events south of the border, is it time for Canada to consider the United States in the same light?
You know, I think I got to take Frank's advice on that one.
Plead the fifth. Do you want me to move to the next
Yeah,
one?
we moved to the
Okay.
next one's going to be an NFL question. I could just see it coming.
Should I kneel? What else can the Canadian business community do to ensure that the new NAFTA improves trade in our region and not inhibit it?
Well, again, I mean, I think this is really, right from the beginning, right after not just the president was elected, but even in the previous administration, I came to the realization that there was quite an underlying protectionist sentiment in the United States, and particularly in what people sometimes refer to as the Rust Belt. That there's been, I thought when Trump said during the election campaign, he had a great line, which was, they used to. You couldn't drink the water, or 20 years ago, you couldn't drink the water in Mexico, and you made cars in Flint, and now you can't drink the water in Flint, and they make cars in Mexico. And I think there was that kind of underlying sentiment, and also that a lot of people become very rich, and there was a big swath of the American public that was left behind, and not only that, but that the people who'd become wealthy looked down their nose at others. And so that kind of underlying sentiment was there, and we really needed, if we were going to beat back the protectionist sentiment in the United States, to do that as a country, not just as a government. We couldn't do that alone. We needed to reach out to the provinces. We needed to reach out to the business community and others to help us tell the story. And I think what's happened so far is that it's beginning to work. I don't think that we're there yet. We still have an awful lot of work to do. But I have never seen such a degree of cooperation and support from the business community and from all of the provinces. I had, Premier Wall down in Washington, and I don't think there's any secret that Premier Wall and the Prime Minister don't get along on everything. It would be fair to say, but he was a real trooper and did a great job, and that's happened with all of the premiers right across the country. Happened when Ron Ambrose was leader of the Conservative Party in terms of being supportive. So I think we've had an awful lot of Team Canada support. In addition to that, we've just got to really do our homework. We have to understand in this changing economy, kind of more, we've got to listen to that great philosopher Walter Gretzky as to where the puck's going to be, not where it is. And we've got to be ahead of the game. And I think our negotiators are in great shape, but I think we're going to need continued cooperation from the provinces and the business community if we're going to make sure that this North America becomes more competitive, because the reality is this isn't about whether we win and the U.S. loses or we win and the Mexicans lose. This is about whether or not we create in North America the most competitive economy in the world, because we're up against some pretty tough competition. And if we spend our time trying to fight a zero-sum game on trade, all of us will be the loser.
I think that's a great message, certainly for the audience today. Final question, has Canada's engagement strategy with the U.S. worked? What is the current state of play in our relationship?
A lot of people have asked me about the relationship with the administration, the new administration, and I have to say that it's excellent. Virtually all of our cabinet ministers have met their counterparts, the secretaries to cabinet. Many of them struck up a very good relationship with them. I think the Prime Minister and the President, have a good working relationship. And as importantly, I think, what I came to realize is that this isn't just about Washington. This is about the United States of America. And while people in Ottawa and people in Washington think those are the only places that decisions get made, the reality is that they get made right across the country. And so we've reached out. I've been to the Western governors, to the New England governors, to the National Governors Association, been to over 24 different cities in the United States. We're bringing in our consuls general into Washington tomorrow to try and make sure that we as an organization in the Government of Canada are working together as a team, that the network really means a network, not just 14 different people off doing their own thing, sharing best practices. How did we manage to do a good job on the Buy America in New York? Truth of the matter was it was partly our consulate, partly also the cooperation from Ontario and Quebec. So it's starting to work, but we've got a long way to go. And as I say, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon, because this isn't going to go away. And I think that the more that we can convince Americans that our futures are linked and our prosperity is linked, the better off we're going to be. So I think we're making progress, but I'm never satisfied. I think we've got an awful lot of work to do. But as I say, I am optimistic. I think people don't shoot themselves in the foot on purpose, and there's always inadvertent actions that lead to things that weren't intended. But I think we're making enough of a case with American legislators and business and others that we're going to get through this. The only thing I will say, and we just have to realize this, and the only thing that I will predict with 100% certainty is that before all of this is over, there will be some drama. Not saying where it's coming from, but there will be some drama. But I think we are going to keep our nose to the grindstone, not get panicked, and just continue to work hard and make progress a little bit at a time, which I think will pay off in the long run.
You don't sit down if you want.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Well, Ambassador MacNaughton, on behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, that was a very, very enjoyable discussion. We appreciated your candor and your ability to share with us some of your insights. I too, like you, think there will be some drama before we see this come to some conclusion. But your remarks about the optimistic state of the trading relationship is very positive to hear. The $2 billion of goods and services that move daily across the border, the sound relationship, the strong foundation, I think those are important messages for all of us to hear. As you pointed out, the times call for active and engaged diplomacy. For decades, we have been beneficiaries of strong, stable bilateral relations. The Canada-US relationship is obviously an incredibly important one with many shared interests. These include a desire for growth and prosperity rooted in a solid economic partnership. I definitely agree with the phrase from Mr. Trudeau that we are a moose now and not a mouse, and I think that will stand in good stead. We are confident in your leadership and your determination to steward our bilateral relationship. We appreciate your many efforts and the messages that you gave us today to promote our interests and to protect our values. We wish you well as you continue to represent our interests in Washington, and we really appreciated the discussion here today. Before we conclude, let me extend another round of thanks to our sponsor, TD Bank. We would also like to thank mediaevents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. To learn more about the club, please visit us at canadianclub.org. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again at an upcoming event. Merci d'être venu. À la prochaine.